Welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Innovative Music Production Techniques with Cakewalk Sonar X3. My name is Jeremy. I'm an advisor here at Berklee Online, and this is Craig Anderton. Welcome, Craig.
Hi, Jeremy.
So Craig is, as well as being an expert on music technology and doing clinics such as these all over the world, he's currently Chief Magic Officer at for Gibson Brands, a parent company of Cakewalk. And he's played on, produced, and mastered over 20 major label recordings. Additionally, he has written over 24 books on musical electronics and contributed articles to magazines, including Electronic Music, Keyboard, and Sound on Sound. And his personal YouTube channel, if you want to check him out afterwards, is youtube.com/the Craig Anderton. So again, pleasure to have you, and pleasure to have you demoing Cakewalk Sonar X3.
Hi, Jeremy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
This is fun. I want to talk a little bit about Sonar. There's a lot of interesting techniques you can do with it, and not generally well known. So I think maybe a good place to start is with the interface itself. Mm-hmm. This is what Cakewalk calls the Skylight interface because it's kind of light and airy, and it's very customizable. Like, for example, there's a feature called screen sets, which are available in other programs, but they do something a little bit different. And you can call up, for example, here I have one called Max Tracks, and they're all like thin so I can see the greatest number of tracks. But I also have Max Console, where I can call up narrow channel strips, see that all at once. If I need more detail out of the channel strips, I can do like a wider version. And one of the interesting things about screen sets with Sonar is you can lock them, or you can let them be dynamic. So for example, if I make some changes here, and I go to another screen set, when I come back, I have the choice of either returning to the way that it was or returning to the altered state that it's in. So that keeps the flow going a lot better. There's also a lot of options to show and hide. Like, for example, there's an inspector module over here which you can show and hide, a browser to the right, and the browser can show media like loops. It can show plugins. You can just drag plugins into a project. It shows what synths you're using in the projects, the various virtual instruments. You can change the positioning of it, like if I want to dock this at the left. So you can really customize the workspace pretty much the way you want. And even within the inspector, let's look at an audio track here. There's a channel strip function you can call up, or you can look at information on the track itself, individual clips, and so on. There's also a dock down here, and you can show and hide the dock just by hitting D. And so if I want to see, for example, the piano roll or the loop construction, because I want to make loops, that's all just a key press away as well. And when you're working within this, you can do things like zoom in, zoom out pretty easily, use key commands, show different views of automation. All right, and here with the auto zoom, if I change the height of one track, I can change them all. So if I need to do more detailed editing, like I can see the automation here, for example. Or the other thing you can do is if you select a track, you can adjust its height, and then any track you select will go to that height. So if you need to go through a bunch of tracks and edit them in detail, you're capable of doing that. So that's another handy feature. So those are some of the main things about the Skylight interface. Okay, there's an interesting thing here. I've got a guitar side chain to the drum, so it'll be more percussive. If I just solo that, you can really hear it. So it adds a little percussive element. Now, if I put that back in the track, now if I take it out, you really lose that percussive driving kind of effect. So that's just something that I find useful, and I thought I'd throw that tip in because this song uses it. So it just seemed like a good excuse to talk about it. All right, let's move on to something else, unless you have any questions about, I mean, there's obviously other aspects to it and key commands and things like that, but that's the basics of it. It's very customizable and
I like that.
very easy to change things. If you want to see if you want to see basically a meter bridge, you can just bring up that part of the console. You can make the I/O go away. You can you can configure it pretty much any way you want. You can choose what options you want to see. Do I want to see these particular aspects of a channel strip? Do I want to see the tracks, the buses, the mains? In the modules itself, do I want to see the input gain and pan or the FX or whatever? So you can pretty much decide how much screen real estate you want to take up on projects. It's great for laptops. It's also great for dual monitor setups because you can take individual windows, you can undock them. Like for example, if I undock this mixer, I can undock the mixer, put it in a separate screen, and then I've got the mixer on one screen, you know, all that. So all that fun stuff. Well, let's call up another file here.
Yeah, I especially like the independent zoom feature too. That must
Yeah,
be
the
really
auto
nice,
zoom is great.
editing really quickly.
And when you're mixing too, to be able to just scan through the channels and see instantly what's going on is real helpful. Now, one of the things that that's been new to X3 is the inclusion of Melodyne. And Melodyne is what most people know it as is pitch correction software. So if you have a shaky vocal, you can fix the pitch. But it can actually do more than that. Like you can add a real harmony. The fidelity is good enough. It has a process called audio random access that analyzes a track and lets you do all kinds of tricks beyond pitch correction. So here I have a cover version of a Who song called Can't Explain, which has a harmony part before it goes into the guitar solo. And I thought it would be kind of cool to show using Melodyne to add a harmony. So let's just play a little snippet here of what we're going to change. I know what it means. Okay, so that's the part where we're going to add the harmony. So what I'm going to do is bounce this to a clip so I can process it as an individual thing within Melodyne instead of having to do 3 separate parts. So we bounce to clip, call it Melodyne, and we get to see, now it's analyzing the track, so I can choose the correct pitches, and there you can see what's going on. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go and I'm also going to copy this track so that we have the original track to do the harmony against, right? So I'm going to clone this track. And let's see, I guess we'll work on this one here. So let's bring Melodyne back up. And we'll bring it to just before this part. Okay, so we can, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the snap so I can get the pitch exactly where I want it to be. Whoops. There we go.
And it's basically putting the pitches on a piano roll that you can
Yeah,
then just
essentially.
edit and drag around like MIDI data.
I'm having a hard time seeing here. Let me extend this a little bit. There we go.
Like that.
Much easier.
So right now you're just moving all the... Oh. There we go. Don't worry, it'll be all right when it's over. You can also sample some of those. That's really cool.
Okay, and while we're there, we now have a guitar freakout coming out, and this is a good place to show what effects chains can do, which is another unusual Sonar feature here. Let's look at the guitar, Now if I play the guitar, just a straight guitar part, right? So what I can do is I decide, well, I want it to be a little more exciting than that, so we'll look at what effects are in there. And actually, I don't think there are any effects in there. So we'll pull in what's called an effects chain. And we can just do that by dragging. We don't have to like insert anything special or anything like that. Got a guitar patch here, which I call power chord. I bring it in, and now let's listen to the guitar. So what's neat about an effects chain is this is actually a combination of effects that have been packaged into an individual plugin. Okay. So inside this one thing, I've got a gate, a compressor, an equalizer, an amp sim, another equalizer after the amp sim, a delay to give it width, and a reverb to give it room, to give it some room size. Plus, I can bring out strategic controls of my choice to knobs and switches. So I've actually constructed this whole thing, put a graphic in the back, and I have this effect I can bring in. So if you want to see how it works, for example, like this equalizer that's on the end, I have a tone control that I've connected to it, and the tone control changes the high frequency response of the curve.
So you've mapped it to sweep that.
So I'm actually getting inside that effect. And if I want to have, for example, if I want to have a bigger stereo spread, I can change the width there, and it alters the delay a little bit in one of the channels to give more of a spread. I can give a bigger room, add more reverb to it, do bass cuts, mid-range scoops, that kind of thing. So what I've basically done is taken all my favorite things, put them into this one effects chain, and this has sort of become my universal go-to guitar thing, because I can bring it in and edit it however I want. Plus, of course, you can open up TH2 Producer, which is the amp sim that's being used in it, and change the amp sounds and things like that. And of course, all this is bundled with Sonar. So that's pretty impressive. There's another really cool thing that Melodyne can do, though. So see, I'm trying to show Melodyne things that don't relate to normal, just fixing bad vocals, right? And it does audio to MIDI conversion. And there we are. So I have this little sort of, I actually just recorded this in my hotel room the night before last because I thought it would be a nice thing to demo. So I brought in a couple loops here. Let's make it a little bigger. And there's a couple drum things and electric piano. And that's the guitar part coming in. That's the guitar part I recorded. Because I wanted a bass, but I didn't have a bass. So I recorded a guitar part, right?
Yeah.
But now what I can do is I can take that guitar part and convert it into MIDI data and drive a bass, which I think is pretty hip. Really cool. So let's insert a bass sound. There's a instrument that comes with it called Dimension Pro, and I've actually done some Gibson EB bass samples for it with a 5-string bass. So I happen to be a fan of 5-string basses, and we'll call up one of the sounds here. Let's see, what do we have? How about a neck pickup and a tapped bridge? That's a good sound. Okay, so now we've got a bass instrument in there. We have a MIDI track just waiting to give it something, right? So what we'll do is we'll have Melodyne analyze this audio track. So here we go again, region effects, Melodyne, create a region effects. It's thinking. And now it's just analyzed what all those guitar notes are. Now all I have to do is take this audio track, bring it into the MIDI track. Watch what happens to the waveform. It's now MIDI. So I'll mute the guitar, and we'll hear the bass. Now one thing I do tend to do when I play it back is I change the length just a little bit, because with the guitar the notes are butting right up against each other, and I want each bass note to have an individual attack. So I'll change the length of all the MIDI notes to, I don't know, like 95% or something, just to give it a little bit of space between them. And now we have
that's really impressive.
And now let's suppose I go, well, I really want it to be a little more percussive. It's kind of a funky thing, right? So I can bring up the interface for Dimension Pro and call up the amp. Let's give it an envelope here. Give a little percussive envelope. I see, one of the reasons I use Sonar is because it's just so fast to do things. I want to make a more percussive envelope. By golly, there it is. So, and of course I can go in there because it's MIDI data. I can go in there and modify anything I want to modify. Like this note hits a little bit late, right? So, I mean, sorry, this note hits a little bit early. Might as well go in there and make it just a little bit later. So let's see, zoom in on that note. Fixed. So now I have a bass part. Very convenient. All right, so that's the audio to MIDI thing. Now this is showing a monophonic line, and the basic version of Melodyne that comes in Sonar is monophonic only, but there is a polyphonic version, so you can actually break out different instruments, things like that. So if you just wanted to modify bass, and this was in a bunch of other tracks, you can do that. Or if you have guitar chords, you can actually break out the individual notes of the chords and process them as MIDI data.
Take your bass notes from guitar chords and make
Or
a bass track. Or...
Yeah, or if you're a guitar player who can't play piano or whatever, you can voice it on the guitar, insert a piano sound,
cool.
Whatever you want to do. So that's what the audio to MIDI is about. Let's look at something else here. How are we doing time-wise?
Oh, good.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
man.
I want to talk about collaboration a little bit. I'm going to editorialize for the benefit of the audience. I really think that collaboration is important in music. I think doing things all by yourself, sitting in a bedroom, is probably not the optimum way to have a musical experience. So you agree. So good. We're on the same page with that.
Page.
All right. Good. So I collaborate a lot with a songwriter over in England named Mark Longworth, and he also wrote the first song, Black Market Daydreams. And he sent me a tune. He said, Craig, I don't think anybody's ever done this quite right. I want to see what you do with it. So the process I use for working with somebody else, is the same process I use for myself with songwriting, which is to use MIDI for the basic construction when I'm first figuring out the song. What's the pitch, what's the key? Because MIDI is so easy to change pitch, so easy to change key. If you commit yourself to audio tracks right off the beginning, well, then you have to do time stretching, and that can affect the fidelity. And maybe I want to change the key, and it's that also affects the fidelity as well. So let's start off with what he originally sent me, which was this is just an MP3 that he recorded on a little standalone recorder when he was doing his songwriting. He said, I have an idea for a song, so here's what it is. So it's very kind of Green Day-ish,
Phaser?
Yeah,
Phaser on the
got a
guitar?
flange sort of thing. Okay, so you get an idea of what he was up to there. So the first thing I did was I wanted to match the tempo. So I turned on the metronome, and well, obviously that's way too fast. So I ended up trying various values for the metronome. That's obviously a lot closer. One cool trick you can do is that as it gets further in the song, of course, it'll drift more and more. So you start lining up where the peaks hit compared to where the measures hit, and you can see, okay, it's definitely off here. So you do a little bit of offsets, and eventually end up with the tempo. In this particular case, it ended up being like 86.54 or something like that. And now the metronome tracks it just fine. Okay, so now I know what tempo he was working with. So the next thing I wanted to do was lay down a MIDI reference track. Now, this is just a situation where I wanted to follow along with the chords, and you'll see why in just a second. But this was just playing along with the chords, just playing the basic, majors, minors, whatever, and listening to it. Okay, so once I had those chords down, here's the cool part about it. There's a plugin included in here called Strum Acoustic. And what this is supposed to do is you give it MIDI notes and it can create strums. It's designed for keyboard players who want like an acoustic guitar kind of strumming rhythm guitar part. But I can play guitar, so I don't need it for that. But what I do need it for is it will read out the chords that it is analyzing. So, okay, so as I'm playing my chords, it's going E, G flat minor, okay, A, B, and so on. So now, as I'm transposing it to like see what works with my voice, I don't have to relearn the song in 12 different keys. I can just follow that and play along with the guitar. So what I ended up finding out was that it worked best for me when it was in A. So now if I change the reference tracks to an A, now when I play it, now we can get rid of the original. And now I have the chord progression.
Transposed up to
Right,
where you
so it's
want it.
transposed up to where I want it to be. So after I played around with this enough, it's like, okay, now it's time to lay down some guitar parts and things like that. So I started messing around with the tempo, and I thought, just listening to it like this by itself, it almost sounds more like it could be a ballad. So I thought, what if I slowed it down a little bit? So I set the tempo to 82. And of course, because it's MIDI, and I thought, okay, here's the basic thing I want to work with. So the way it finally ended up, after all that, let me mute all the original tracks. Here's the way the song ended up being done. Well, let me get him out of there.
I don't want to criticize, but I will never compromise at all.
Quite different.
Yeah,
For you.
but in a good way.
Yeah, well, he liked it. He was really happy about it. He said, okay, I like the way the song is being done now. And it's the only ballad I've done, so it proved to my daughter I could do things under 90 beats per minute, so that was kind of worth doing for that. But the point of that was the collaborative aspect. So it enabled me to customize the song very easily to something that would fit in my range. Now, one other aspect of collaboration, which really doesn't relate to Sonar that much, but it's kind of interesting. When I would recommend this to people who are watching this seminar, is when you start playing with songs, it's really good to get outside input. So I have a forum called Sound Studio and Stage, and I post my stuff up there and I ask people what they think of it. If you have any suggestions. So when it went into the big chorus,
When I'm strong, there's no
let's see, where's it going to the big chorus here?
feeling only ever I feeling only but I'm not really all that bad.
Okay.
Are you? So take me as I
So it's going into the
am, 'cause
chorus.
that's the only
And this guy said, you should really add a lead guitar part for that, and you should add a big choir in it, and there should be a lead-in on the drums. And I thought, okay, so let's give it a try. So one of the really cool things about Sonar is you can edit individual objects just as you would edit a track. So here's where's my drum lead-in? Drum lead-in is up here. Get it up. Okay, so there's my drum lead-in. So I say, well, let's just add an effect to this one thing. Oops, sorry. And we will add insert an effect. How about like a flanging type effect or something like that? So modulator, and then also let's add some limiting to make it like really loud, so it really pops.
Really punchy. Yeah.
Really pop it. Now, I'm not a big fan of limiting, but hey, there's a time and a place for everything, right? So we will add. Let's see, I think I'll add the Boost 11, which is like a real cheap and cheerful kind of thing. Just a couple knobs, pretty easy to adjust. So now we have.
so take me at
So now we got our fill. And then I did add a lead guitar and I did add a choir.
so take me as I am, 'cause that's the only way. Get me when I'm weak and I'll do anything you say.
And so as it gets closer to the end, I started getting it more and more complicated and doing more and more things.
God knows
There's the guitar, there's the chorus, is a lot more push, right? And it's all because of the virtue of collaboration. So here I get this song from this guy over in England. I put it up on a forum. I get comments from people in Texas and California saying, try this, try that. I try it, I end up with a song. And another interesting thing about Sonar is that up on the toolbar here, there's a direct connection to Gobbler, which is a collaboration and backup website. So you can back up projects to it. You can collaborate with others. You can send files to other Sonar users. You can exchange projects and do all kinds of things. So I just really wanted to hit on some of the collaborative aspects of what you can do these days. So moving right along. That was fun, right?
And I find it quite amazing as well.
How are we doing on time?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Working in the online format and having that collaboration still be there, I think is huge, and being able to show that off here is huge too.
Well, now there's also video. Sonar does video, and let me call that up here. Berklee Projects, Ambience, right. And so I thought one thing that would be kind of fun would be to do an instant New Age Hearts of Space soundtrack kind of thing, right? So I have a video here that I generated in Vegas, and it's all just like weird fractal stuff and things like that. Can I play? Oh, the format's not supported. What did I do? I did something wrong. Oh, helps to drag it into the video window instead of the audio one, doesn't it?
That's all it is.
In fact, I'll just import it. That'll make it easier. There's a, because when you import it, I want to show you what happens when you import it. What it does is it actually opens up a video window for you here, and it docks a video playback thing, and you can also show thumbnails. So if you want to find out where you are in the video, there you are. And of course, the more you zoom in, the more detail you'll see to the thumbnails. You can get down to individual frames if you're really nuts about it. So here we have this video thing, and we want to add like some kind of interesting ambient stuff. So I actually have some tracks of ambient samples here. So we'll just drag them in. You kind of can't go wrong if there's no tempo, right? So we'll put in one track, and let's split it here and add in something else. And we'll throw in a nice little crossfade. So we have a nice mushy change from one thing to another, and as we play it back, and then you can see the video develop there in the video window. And maybe a bowed cymbal effect at some point. And again, remember, this is all dockable. So it's sitting in the dock there, but I can undock it if I just want to have a separate video window. I can resize it. I can stretch to fit it. I can show actual size. I can show SEMTI. I can show, beats, measures beats, ticks, that kind of thing. So you have a bunch of options here. But let's go back to SEMTI. That's a little bit loud and annoying, so we'll change that. So now we're all ready for our PBS documentary,
And it's already kind of doing the crossfade when you overlap them.
Yeah, it just does that. You can also not only can you crossfade, you can choose a default crossfade, so you can do equal power like this one, or you can choose a linear one or whatever. All you have to do is just bring it in, and there it is. So very convenient. Doesn't create separate folders or anything like that. And you can move them around, depending upon what's happening with the video. Like there's a major change in color here, so maybe what we really want to do is have this new section start here and crossfade this over here.
Worked pretty perfectly.
The Voyager mission, now in its 16th year, goes past the galaxy. I mean, there you are, ready to go. So, render it, take it to the FedEx drop-off, done. So the video capabilities are really nice. Sonar added a whole bunch of enhancements in the last update to fit Microsoft's new video engine, which is just more powerful, more flexible, faster, all that good stuff. So it's become much more useful for that. Now, while we're here, let's see. I also want to show you some time stretching things. One of the functions in today's music, for better or for worse, is that you can change the pitch and you can change the timing and you can change everything, for better or for worse, like I said. But there's sometimes, I tend to think that most of the time you really want to let things breathe You want to leave things more or less alone. You don't want to like, tweak everything like totally. But every now and then there's situations where you really kind of need to do that. Where something just isn't quite right for whatever reason. In terms of timing, this transitions from a verse which is fairly laid back into a chorus which is supposed to be really intense. So when you want something intense, the drums are like really right on. The drum part's exactly right on. The guitar that's playing along with it isn't so. It's a little bit sloppier. So you lose some of the power. So let's listen to that transition and you'll see what I mean.
I to America, my dream is gone. They tap your phone and send out drones. They all are clones and they do not give a damn.
So you hear the guitar's fighting with it a little bit. So let's just solo that and the drums, so it's really easy to hear the differences. And now it'll be even more obvious. We'll do the kick, we'll do the snare, we'll do the closed hat, and we'll do that guitar. And now if you just listen to the guitar part. You can hear obvious things that are wrong. So what we can do is just show transients. Just so transients on the guitar part. And going to. And now what this is doing is this is analyzing the peaks of the guitar. And you can see where they fall. We'll make this a little higher so it's easier to see. Okay. And we'll zoom really in so you can see how much the timing is off, so I can embarrass myself here. And what we'll do is also quantize the snap so we can see where the eighth notes are supposed to be. Well, as you can see, these first two are pretty close. They're okay. This one's definitely early. This one's a lot early. So let's fix that one. And let's fix this one. See, how's that? That's okay. This one's way off. You can see this one's way off. On. A little bit off, but we'll fix it anyway because we're here. And all right, another one that's off. Okay, so I think we're in better shape now. It was mostly toward the beginning that it was bad. But also let's go. I don't know. There's another one that's pretty off. And let's go to the end where there's all those chords that are hitting on the eighths, and just make sure those are on. So there's a really precise lead into the next section.
You want to be able to get that really synced up.
Yeah, you want it to be really working with the drums. You want to have a rhythm section. So let's listen now. So much tighter.
Oh, yeah.
And now when you listen to the way the transition happens when it goes in the chorus. And now what I would normally do is I'd add the power guitar distortion thing to that, but since we're running low on time, well, hey, actually, why not? I can show you how fast it happens. We'll just take the effects chain, we'll drag it in, we got the guitar stuff, we got the power chord, and now we've got exactly what we want.
Sounds great too.
So now one other thing I want to point out while we're in this song is you can create your own mixer architecture with what's called the Pro Channel, and this exists on a per strip basis. Okay, so each channel that you have can basically have its own channel strip depending upon what what kind of sound you want to have. Like for the drums, for the kick and the snare, I really like adding some limiting to that. You also notice that I've added some EQ. There's a console emulation feature in Sonar, which normally I thought those things were kind of ridiculous, but I did some analysis, and I found out that really what they're modeling is a lot of the transformer on the input stage, which has its own distortion characteristics and resonances and things like that. So it's actually. And also you have certain nonlinearities with analog consoles. The left and the right are never going to be exactly the same, whereas they are in a digital system. So a lot of people, when they listen to an analog console, they say, oh, it has a wider sound stage. Well, it has a wider sound stage because there's differences between the channels, whereas with a digital one, it's going to, if there are no differences. So anything that's mono is strictly mono. So there's some slight nonlinearities, and also the transformer characteristics. There's also a tape emulation module in here, which again, I normally don't use tape emulators, but they didn't make a caricature of tape emulation. It sounds like my old Tascam 2 track, So I added that to the acoustic guitar part, and it just makes it snap a little bit more, Just gives it just a little more of a push. And what's interesting too is that with the EQ, you have your choice of several different EQ curves, which are basically like modeled after certain famous consoles that I probably shouldn't mention trade names. And there's a flyout on the EQ, so you can also see spectrum analysis in the background, which really helps you pinpoint
That's really
things.
useful.
Yeah, and it's really useful when you're mastering too. So as you can see, the different curves take into account like different type of inductors that people used back in the day. And of course, you can change your your EQ graphically, or you can change it with the knobs, or whatever else you need to do. So it's nice having that really expanded view, and you can also see how the different curves affect it, either more surgically or more like an analog type of thing where you have leakage between the different bands or interactions, I should say. So there's that aspect. And I guess I'll leave you with one more thing, which is mastering in the program. Now, this isn't a mastering program in the sense of like a Wavelab or a SoundForge with like, noise reduction and analytics and things like that. But in today's world, a lot of times, what you're really looking at is singles. Okay?
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've set up 2 channels here. The mix goes into a mix channel, a mix bus, and I mix through the bus. But then the mix bus also goes through another bus, which I call mastering. When I'm normally working on a song, I'm just going through the mix bus and I'm mixing and I'm listening to it. But when it's time to master it, I'll put it through this additional bus, and that gives me 8 stages of EQ, which is what I find to be essential for mastering. Plus I have the Pro Channel options, plus I have plugins I can add for limiting or multi-band compression or whatever. So in this particular case, I thought, well, it really needs a little more. Here, I'll bring it earlier in the song. It needs a little more treble to it. It's a little bit dull. And I also wanted to drop the lower mids a little bit because there's a little bit of mud in there. So that
Make the guitar pop.
Yeah, it tightens it up a little bit. The treble, though, makes the guitar pop too much. So I have a little dip just where the guitar frequency is, so I can still have a high frequency boost. Got just a slight boost on the kick to bring it out a little more. And then I'm adding some multi-band compression to squeeze it a little bit because, that's what people want these days. So I can push it and get 3 or so dB of limiting on the various bands. And so now I've got something that's a lot more master ready. If you listen to it now, I'll take those things out and you can hear how much it affects the sound. So it's just just a whole lot better, for multiple reasons.
Sounds a lot more polished.
And then the console emulation helps as well. If we have time for one more thing, are you into comping much? Doing composite recording of combining various bits of various parts and that sort of thing.
Not personally, but I have a couple friends that are really into taking weird, random, cool recordings of city sounds and stuff. And
well, I meant more like taking multiple lead guitars and multiple vocals and picking the best parts, the best phrases, and assembling things. That kind of composite recording. Sonar has. I love the composite recording in here, and since I didn't want to go through the time required to record all the different parts, I have like 4 guitar tracks here, and I'll just show you how it works. What I've done is I've split them into different phrases, and the way when you split them, when you split on one track, you split on all the tracks. So it's very easy to create separate sections and then audition them. What you do is you pick one, you start playback, and you go, well, I like that, I don't like that, whatever, I'll listen to the other one. Okay, I like that one, so I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm going to move over to the next one. Do I like that one? Do I like this one? What about this one? I blew that one. How about this one? Of all these, I definitely like the 4th one the best. So I'll hit enter on that one, and now I can move over to the next one and just keep going. So it's just a question of going up and down with the arrows in the columns and back and forth with the arrows.
Really quick workflow.
It's incredibly quick. So that's one of my absolute favorite features. So There's that, and then we can close out with something so you can have theme music to end with, which is the matrix view, and this is great for EDM stuff. And if you use Ableton Live, it'll be a familiar environment to you because it arranges clips in a matrix with loops, so you can trigger scenes.
That's great. That's great.
So you can go kind of playing and arranging with that sort of thing. So
Awesome.
there's your overview.
Awesome.
There's
Well,
a ton more things. but
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Craig.
thank you.
As the track goes on, well,
One thing you can do is you can record all this stuff to the linear tracks in the background. So as you're playing with this stuff, it can record in the linear tracks, and you can edit it like a conventional DAW. So
that's awesome. Well,
I've recorded that stuff, and there it is.